Ultimately, I think the whole idea of not being able to share a trail, whether you're talking in Watchung or in any other park, to share a trail between hikers and riders is a bit ridiculous. So Lone Rider here, and I'm here at Watchung Reservation Park, where despite the no new bike signs that were put up this past August, work is proceeding apace on cutting a trail, or at least in some cases marking it out. This is intended to be for cyclists, and you can see there's not much of a trail here yet. However, these pink or purple flags, as you can see, they go all the way up the hillside. And on the other side of the street, there's more still. The street there being Skytop. And I'm ambivalent about this. On one hand, I'm very glad that we hopefully will soon be getting access to the park on these trails. What I'm not really all that happy about is that the trail is a separate trail. And what they're doing is there's an existing 40 miles of trail in the park, more or less. And what they're doing here is they're building an additional 13-point-something, 14 miles of trail, just for mountain bikers. Now, the only reason they're doing this is because people believe that it's not possible for the mountain bikers to safely share the trail with other trail users. I call bullshit on that one. If you look at any other park system in the county, basically, you've got, Morris County, Somerset County, etc., all over the place, all surrounding us. Pretty much as far as I know, Union County here and Essex are the only two that don't like the idea. And I don't think it's a surprise that when I did my Open Records Act request trying to get information on the origin of the mountain bike ban here in Watchung Reservation, one of the things that I found out was that Union County didn't have any source material documenting the situation on the trail here in Watchung. What they relied on as source material, they said, was a trail study done of two atypical, i.e. larger than normal single track and therefore subject to heavier travel and more erosion and so forth, both natural and man-induced weathering, in South Mountain, a park in another county, in Essex County, in fact. So I don't think it's a surprise that both Union County and Essex have essentially similar policies. The only difference, as far as I can tell, is that in Essex County, there's actually an ordinance that would apply to mountain biking. It was never intended to. It predates mountain biking. As far as I know, it was from the time of like high-wheelers or safety bicycles in the 1800s or early 1900s. But what it says is you can't ride where there's no paved surface, which would cover the activity of mountain biking. Now, the question is, was it intended to? I don't think so. I think this is a reappropriation of something to curtail an activity that at the time was politically unpopular. And it's worth noting that this was applied to mountain biking for the first time in, I guess, nearly 100 years, around the time that mountain biking was banned in Watchung as well. The difference, of course, is that the ban in Watchung here didn't have any legal basis as far as I can tell. I was actually looking for a actual ban or ordinance. I really wanted to find one. And I wanted to find one because obviously that would make it very easy to do away with the ban. You just write the freeholders and say, we want you to repeal or modify this legislation. I didn't find anything about mountain biking or bikes on trails in the park. What's interesting is I later found out that they claimed that an old ordinance from 1983 about biking on roads, sidewalks, and paths and not blocking cars they said was what regulated mountain biking in the park here. And my problem with that, of course, is that now this trail hasn't really been made yet. This has just been marked out. But even where there are trails, you know, they're not, look around you. You see any roads, sidewalks, and paths? Okay? So, the only difference is that in Essex, they actually did have a legal basis for it. It just was, I think they were stretching it. I don't think it was ever intended to apply to mountain biking. I think they just kind of, they took something that sounded like it would cover the issue and ran with it. I think they tried to do the same thing in Union County. I think initially when they implemented the ban, it was done at a backroom meeting in March of 1995 by a handful of unelected government employees. I think what they realized is, well, sooner or later someone's going to challenge us. What do we do? Oh, well, look through the code, see if you find anything that's about bikes. And they found what they could claim was, well, this is about where you can ride your bike. Yeah, but only on roads, sidewalks, and paths. It doesn't regulate the trails. It doesn't talk about mountain biking. So they goofed. They picked something they thought was applicable, but it actually wasn't. And so they basically backed themselves into a corner. But in the meantime, you know, those of us who want to ride, we're still waiting. You know, these little pink flags, that's going to be the trail of the future, but what it's going to be is a separate trail. And again, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around why is it that people don't think you can share the trail. We know it works in Morris County. We know it works in you know, Somerset and pretty much every other place you go. The only place it doesn't work is here in Watchung, apparently. And I am still trying to wrap my mind around that concept. Why is it that in Watchung Reservation you can't share the trail? Are the laws of physics different here in Union County? I mean, does a tire accelerate or decelerate faster here than anywhere else in the known universe? You know, are people's reaction times different? Does time itself, you know, as Agent Scully said in that X-Files episode, time can't just disappear. It's a universal invariant. And Mulder's response was, not in this zip code. And I feel a little creepy bringing that episode up right now because that episode actually involved people disappearing in the woods. And what am I doing? Traipsing through an as yet unmade trail in the woods. But be that as it may, the point is, no, time doesn't pass any differently here in Union County than it does anywhere else in New Jersey or the world. The laws of physics aren't different. If you can share a trail in Lewis Morris or Chimney Rock, you can share a trail here in Watchung Reservation. So yeah, I filed my Open Records Act request to see if they'd ever given it, you know, how many tickets had they given in the last 10 years? We found out they gave one ticket that wasn't properly filled out. Now, it was after I filed that Open Records Act request that the signs were taken down throughout the park. And since they were uniformly taken down and the county was contacted, they didn't say they took them down, but they didn't deny they took them down. And since they hadn't been communicating with us very well off and on over the past year before that, people just figured, well, okay, you know, way back when, at the February meeting, they promised to open at least part of the park to mountain biking. They haven't been responding to communications since then, talking to us much. But we could see here they appear to have taken all the signs down. So it's an affirmative action. You know, it's one thing if there's no sign there in the first place. You can say, well, just because there's not a sign saying you can't do something, does that mean it's legal? No. But if there is a sign saying you cannot do something and it's removed, well, that sends a very clear message. So, and in the absence of the county communicating with us one way or the other, we kind of had to assume that this was their action speaking for them. So, a lot of us just rode there openly. I did, and we rode there from December of 2015 through August of 2016. So about 8 months. 8 months of people riding there openly. And then they put new no bike signs back up. And they didn't just put them back up at Watchung when they had them before. They put them at every other park in the county. So you have two things. One, they were basically given an example of how shared trails work. For 8 months, people shared the trail here in Watchung, and there was not a problem with it. There were no safety concerns. There were no trail damage concerns. There was nothing. Another thing is that the posting of the no bike signs back at Watchung was accompanied by additional new trail closures all over the county. And they could argue, well, the rule always applied countywide, blah, blah, blah. If they say that, it's because they couldn't just make a rule about Watchung. However, I think we know the idea that a 1983 ordinance about roads, paths, and sidewalks authorized banning mountain biking in 1985, or bikes on the trails when the ordinance doesn't refer to mountain biking or even contain the word trail, and what it does refer to is clearly paved infrastructure. And then you have, well, it predates the ban by 10 years, and there's all sorts of questions about that. I think we could argue that yes, one could argue that a law or an ordinance can't just apply to one spot in the county. However, it's quite clear that this law or ordinance was never meant to be about mountain biking or bikes on trails. So, here's the thing. Yeah, these are new trail closures. And how do we know that? Well, people were riding there, and there were never any signs that said you couldn't. The little trail by the Passaic River, a couple blocks from my house, I grew up riding. I was riding there before I even rode at Watchung. I was riding there, in fact, before the county put a sign there that said Passaic River Trail. When it was just a little dirt trail, the trailhead was hundreds of feet from where it is now. A lot of the good stuff hadn't been ruined by somebody using a bulldozer or a trail making machine. They hadn't put wooden bridges with steps over some of the creeks, forcing you to dismount. It was much more wild and woolly back then. Didn't have the amenities, if you will, but it was a better trail. But the point is that, yeah, I was riding there basically before the government decided to try and, fix up the trail and make it fancy or whatever. And then, 15 years later or whatever, come and put up no new bike signs after they put them back up at Watchung. And guess what? All the time I was riding there was never a no new bike sign. There was never a sign that said you couldn't bike there. So, these were new trail closures. So I'm looking at it this way. And I think this is how any reasonable person has to look at it. I'm looking at it like, wait a minute. You know that sharing the trail works, because it worked at Watchung for 8 months. Here, you're not going to have to share the trail. You're actually, these pink flag markings are actually going to be a totally separate trail from the existing trail network. So, one, we know that sharing the trail works, but we also know that here you're not going to have to do that if you don't want to. Secondly, in addition to building a totally separate trail and leaving the non-bikers 40 miles of trail in this park, and we're only getting like between 13 and 14, they're also closing every other park in the county to mountain biking, parks that were never closed before. So what you have is, yes, the bikers are getting 14 miles of separate trail, but the non-bikers are getting every park in the county except for those 14 miles of trail at this one park here in Watchung. So we're losing all our local parks, all our local little trails, but we're gaining access to, assuming they finish building it, to 13 or 14 miles of trail in one park in the county. What are the the non-bikers, i.e. the hikers and so forth, losing? Well, they're not losing anything. They've already had access to every park in the county, unlike the mountain bikers, who were denied access here at Watchung, although we had access at many other places, local little trails that are now closed. But they already had access to those going back, basically forever. But now they have access to them without having to worry about interacting with bicycles, because all those little local parks have been now closed to bikes. So they had access to them before, but now they have access to them without having to share with bikes. And they haven't lost anything at Watchung either, because the 13 or 14 miles of new trails they're talking about building, and that they've marked out with these little flags here, these 13 or 14 miles of new trails are going to be separate from the existing trail network. So the cyclists, as nice as it is to have a large amount of trail in one place, I'd much rather ride 13 or 14 miles of trail than 1 mile of trail. But we have to point out that while the gain in terms of mileage may be positive in favor of the cyclist, what we are losing is little local trails here and there with piecemeal amounts of trail access. And that's still a loss, especially if you might ride Watchung once a week, but you might ride your little dinky local trail every day, after school, after work, whatever. So, because it is so local, Watchung maybe, like in my case, Watchung's 4 or 5 miles from my house, but this little local trail by the Passaic River, which was, very short, but it was still a trail, that was 2 blocks from my house. So I rode that every day. And I guess what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is, we know that sharing the trail works, but more importantly, we also know that here they're not going to have to share the trail. So it's like a double secret whammy in favor of this being, something that nobody should object to. If you're a hiker, this is a good deal for you because they're closing all assuming you're a hiker that doesn't like bikes. A lot of hikers don't care. But assuming you're one of these hikers that doesn't like bicycles, you're getting a good deal here. They're closing every other trail in the county to bikes, and yeah, they are going to allow people to bike and watch them, but on separate trails. So you're still going to have your 40 miles of existing trail that are going to be uninterrupted. So this is a good deal for the non-biker. Except for the trail closures in all the local parks, which they had no reason to do, and which doesn't accomplish anything except pissing off a lot of local riders like myself. This is an okay deal for cyclists. It would be better if they just opened the entire park, but getting access to 13 or 14 miles of trails. Again, I don't see why that should have been accompanied by closing every other park in the county, but that's what they did. If you're a cyclist, this isn't the best deal in the world, but if you're a non-cyclist, it's a great deal. Especially because it includes all these other trail closures, and because the trails they are going to allow us to ride on are going to be separate. So basically what I'm trying to figure out is why do people still object to this? I think they object to it because their objections are ideologically driven. And I don't think that's right. I think that we should have a government policy that's based on fact, that's based on reality, and it's based on fairness. And there's nothing fair about closing trails to trail users, to mountain bikers, to anyone else. And there's nothing fact-based about the idea that we can't share the trail, whether it's here in Watchung or whether it's in a little dinky park by the Passaic River. So I can't wait till these trails are open, but I also wish we didn't have to lose access to every other trail. And since they're building separate trails here, this trail is going to be completely separate from all the other trails in the park. I fail to see how anybody could object to it, whether you like mountain biking or not.